Hi there, it's Tara, she of all things transformational, transformational guidance coaching, transformational body work, and for our purposes here today, transformational yoga. And you know what? These things all go together because the body is the storage unit for everything going on in the mind. And so, sometimes we tend to separate things that we do with our body from things that we do with our mind as if they are, not related, but in fact they are related. And what I have found is that not only does yoga kind of smooth some of the rough areas in the mind, if you think about beach glass, how over time it becomes soft, the edges are no longer sharp or threatening, that's kind of what yoga does in a lot of ways to some of the emotional tendencies that we have that could be destructive, some of the unrealized emotional parts that haven't been listened to yet that kind of tend to come up from underneath and steer the bus, sometimes crashing it. And also, our reaction versus response tendencies and all of these kinds of things. But it's not just because we're doing yoga only. It's also helpful if we're actually using the technology of yoga appropriately. What does that mean? Well, yoga really is a technology. And so just like any kind of, think about, I love to cook, right? And so in my kitchen, I have different appliances and different tools that do different jobs. Now, I'm not going to use a spoon to chop my carrots, right? Because that's actually, the spoon is the wrong technology for chopping. Nor am I going to use my food processor to cook my soup, right? So when we learn to understand what the different technologies of the yoga poses, the yoga breath work, the meditation processes, what these technologies can offer us, and when we learn to embody them in a way that's appropriate for us, in a way that we're using the appropriate discipline at the right time, and in a way that's safe, all of a sudden some things in our body tend to kind of sort themselves out in our mind a little bit, or at least it gives us what I call elbow room. Elbow room is when you have enough space to work something out in your life. Maybe it's because physically something in your life changed, like, maybe you had a job that was distracting, or a relationship that was distracting, or something like that. And when you have a break, you have that elbow room. But when it comes to the psychosomatic relationships, what I mean by elbow room is when the body kind of gets out of the way a little bit because we're nurturing it in a good way for ourselves, then the mind has that elbow room to allow things to bubble up, especially if we have a good meditation practice. So, how does this pertain to alignment in asana? Well, I think it does pertain, because what I have found is that as my alignment got better, because I got into better instruction and I felt things more effectively in my body, then I actually started to have a greater sense of calm and peace and centeredness and self-realization. And sometimes self-realization is the lowercase s. So I don't mean self in that case, but more so like, how am I standing? Where are my hips? Where's my spine? Where's my head? Where's my mood? Where are my thoughts? That kind of self, like the 3D in the body, in the here and now self. And then there is the capital S, self, where we realize none of it matters. because we are a divine entity. And that also, that can be realized through yoga practices of asana, pranayama, meditation, these things. There can be some realization of that for sure. And so when we're doing the poses in a way that nurture the energy channels of the body, that recognize the anatomical relationships of the body in general and you specifically, then all of a sudden that elbow room is created. So we're going to approach one of the most done poses, the downward dog, Adho Mukha Śvānāsana. And what I have seen quite a lot in my over 25 years of practicing and over 15 years of teaching yoga is that this pose is often, unfortunately, I'm going to say mistaught, misunderstood, and misused. So let's just say this. When this pose is done well, the body is able to claim a sense of freedom, empowerment, openness, calmness, and strength. When this pose is done incorrectly, it creates different kinds of pathologies. What I see most frequently is pathologies in the shoulders, pathologies in the low back, and occasionally pathologies in the neck, and sometimes pathologies having to do with elimination. Yes, pooping. Because sometimes the spine isn't used very well in this pose. Sometimes the arms aren't used very well, and so it results in problems that we don't know are coming from the pose. So I aim to clarify some of those misperceptions about the pose so that we can have that clear energy, clear anatomical organization in the body, and then the energy channels, aka the nadis, the energy channels of the body, have clear passage. And then the mind has space because it's not negotiating a congested body or stopped up energy channels. So we're going to explore this really, really often done pose. And you're going to need today a chair. And if you have a couple blocks or same size books would do, or bricks would do. So the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to find Tadasana. So you're going to bring your feet to be about parallel. You're going to bring your arms alongside your body, open your palms with a bit of energy. Bring your weight to your heels for today's Tadasana. And as you bring your weight to your heels, feel that cause a little bit of toning in the front of the thighs. And from there, as you open up and engage the palms and the hands, feel a little toning in the back of the arms at the triceps. And as you take a deep breath and exhale, you're going to feel the back top of the head lift up towards the ceiling, allowing the chin to softly quiet down. Not necessarily tucking the chin, but at least not lifting it. So I'd like you to imprint how your torso feels here, how the front of the body feels, the openness across the shoulders, I hope, the softness in the neck, some length in the belly, yeah? Let's imprint that. And then let's inhale and let's bring the arms overhead. And with the arms overhead, you can fan them together and apart a few times. And what you're going to do is you're just going to find the amount of distance between your hands that you need to kind of frame the ears. So if I turn to the side, you can see that when I bring my arms a little farther apart, it helps me bring my hands back more, my arms back more. Some people, if they bring their hands together, their arms are going to go really in front of their face because they have so much adhesion in their shoulders. So those people really need to widen their hands quite a bit. And so feel into your body, and if you need to use a mirror, use a mirror. Feel into your body how far apart your hands are and the energy in your back. And I just want to pose to you for a second that actually this is a version of downward dog. Okay? And so then you can release the arms. You can give them a little shake if you want. And we're going to take this to a wall. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. We're going to need a wall today, okay? So if you aren't at a wall, move the camera, find a wall. You don't need a mat for this part yet, but you will need a mat and a wall later on in the sequence. Okay, so we're going to bring the arms up to the wall now. Feet parallel as if in Tadasana. And you're going to walk the arms, and you can widen them, as wide as you want, really, so that you can start to press the fingertips into the wall and lift the chest up, but drop the shoulders back. And then once you're there, you're going to what's called externally rotate the upper arms. So that means the soft part of the elbow is trying to face up to the ceiling. Not an easy thing to do for some people's shoulders, and not exactly anatomically normal. If you hyperextend, please slightly undo it and ever so slightly bend the elbows. We don't want hyperextension. Okay, so from there, we're going to walk back. And as you walk back, I want you to bend your knees and flip your tailbone up, kind of like you have a paintbrush strapped to your tailbone, and you're trying to draw a line up the wall behind you towards the corner of the ceiling and wall behind you. So you may not come down this far. Maybe you're going to be kind of, at 45 degrees, and maybe your tailbone isn't going to, flip up that much, but you're going in that direction, okay? That's the work here, is in the direction of. And then remind your upper arms to externally rotate if you can. And see if you feel that same energy through the arms and the trunk that you felt when you were standing up with the arms reaching overhead. Good. And then you can exhale, press the feet into the floor, come up, and bring the arms down, and shake it out for a minute. Give yourself a little respite. And then we'll grab the chair. So if you want, you can put the chair against the wall. You don't necessarily need to do that. And so we'll take the chair back with the hands and do the same thing that we just did. You're going to bend the knees, keep the feet parallel, please, as best as your body can. Make sure that your knees don't knock together. So please root across the ball of each foot, not leaning too much into the pinky edge or caving into the inside edge of the feet, but distributing the weight evenly across the ball of the feet and the heels. Draw the knees apart if they tend to knock together. And then we're going to bend the knees, scoop the hips up and back as if you have a paintbrush that you're wishing you could reach the corner of the ceiling and wall behind you. And maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I think sometimes we need to exaggerate in the body so the body kind of gets the message of what we're trying to do. And then if this is no problem for you, you can walk the feet a little farther back and bring the hands to the chair seat. But for some, it's best just to keep the hands higher. Keep the hands up on the chair back. This is also a great thing to practice on kitchen counters. Sometimes the right window ledge or stair railing works. And then exhale. Come out and release down. And just give it a little shake out. Give the shoulders a break. And then I like to do what I call a commercial break. And we're going to just bring a little counter pose in. So you're going to bring your right arm over your left, and you can start by hugging your shoulders if you want, or you can just wind the arms up into, this is Guardasana, eagle arms. Just a little teeny Dip of the chin is fine. You can bend the knees, and we aren't tucking the tail, but you can allow the tailbone to be a little heavy towards the floor. And then release. And other side, left arm over right, and wind the arms up. Just broaden the back a little bit and breathe into the back, breathe into the shoulders. And release. Okay, so now we're going to move on. So we can take the chair out of the way. And let's grab our blocks. And what you're going to do, please, is you're going to place the blocks against the wall. Now, I'd like you to remember how far apart were your hands to kind of frame your ears. So either remember or recreate that distance between your hands. And then that's about how far apart you want your blocks to be. Because I know that a lot of times in yoga classes, we're taught to, line the middle finger up with the shoulder and have the fingers pointed straight ahead. Well, maybe that's the end pose, if we really get to complete the pose. But for most people, there's so much bound up in the shoulders, especially in our culture of phones, computers, driving, etc., that we need to make a modification so that we don't further injure these shoulders and that we use the technology of the pose correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to make suction cups out of our hands. So spread the fingers as wide apart as you can. When we place them on the blocks, we're going to have a little bit of a turnout, and we're going to have the hands a little bit, possibly for you, everybody's different, a little bit wider than the shoulders. Okay? So with my blocks against the wall, and I have them pretty, I have them on the higher, medium setting. I'm just going to slightly turn them, and then I'm going to come into a plank pose. And so plank pose is generally the distance between your hands and feet in downward dog. Sometimes we need to make a small adjustment. This is about the distance. And so from plank pose, you can lower the knees. You're going to grab the mat with your toes. You're going to make sure your hands have good contact, fingers kind of spreading around the block. And we're going to take a deep breath. Exhale, keep the knees bent, lift the heels, and glide your tailbone up and back. And imagine if you have that paintbrush on the tailbone, now you might actually kind of be getting into the corner of the ceiling and wall. And look at these blocks are giving me the ability to really get a lot of length through my spine. So we're going to let the head dangle. Don't need to do anything with the head right now. Release it. And we're going to keep the knees deeply bent. Lift the heels. Scoop the hips up and back. And then you're going to see if you can bring that slight external rotation into your upper arms so the soft part of the elbow faces up. Now, if you tend to be a little looser in the hamstrings, you can play with lowering the heels down. And since you can kind of see your heels, make sure that you can't see the inner edge of your heels when you lower your heels down to the floor. Maybe they don't reach the floor all the way. Don't adjust how close your hands and feet are to each other to make the heels reach the floor. That is a misnomer. That's, again, one of those things that's sort of like an end piece of the final pose. It's not necessary, as much as retaining this length in the spine is really tantamount to shoulder health, to lumbar vertebrae health, and to the sacroiliac health, as well as to giving the most benefit to the organs here. So then let's exhale and release down. And perhaps you would like to rest into a child's pose for a couple breaths. You can separate the knees as much as you wish for your own comfort, or some people prefer to kneel if that's comfortable on your knees, whatever feels good to you right now to give the arms a little rest. So let's take a few breaths. And if you are in child's pose, take some deep, deep breaths into your back so that you really feel your breath expanding the posterior bones and massaging those muscles. Good. One or two more, and then release. Good. And then we'll move on to trying the pose without the blocks. So you can take those blocks away, come back to that plank pose to find the distance between the hands and the feet. And remember, you're going to make suction cups out of your hands. So you're going to spread the fingers as wide as you need to. You're going to turn your arms out a little bit. You're going to have some width between your hands. And then tuck the toes, exhale, lift the hips up and back. And see if you can create, again, that sensation that you had when you were standing up with arms overhead. Really open in the front of your body, long through the spine. And then we're going to externally rotate the upper arm. So you're going to try to point the soft part of the elbows up. It may not happen all the way, but you're sort of gathering in by contracting the triceps. If the hands are slipping, grip the top of the mat or the sides of the mat. And then if you are on the more flexible side and you want to play with lowering the heels back and down, you can, but don't worry so much about the heels meeting the floor. That is a very kind of last piece of the pose, much more important to keep the length in the spine, to build the right kind of stamina in the shoulders, to keep the pelvis, the tailbone, and the spine all moving in one unit. So if you think about how like a Lego figurine or a Barbie doll, its legs move independently of the trunk, that's kind of how we want our legs to move. We want our hip bones, our tailbone, and our spine to move as one unit, and the legs to kind of move in the sockets independently of the pelvis. And you're breathing, and then you're going to exhale, release the knees down. Probably feel really good to come into a child's pose and breathe into the back. Deep, deep, deep breath, moving the bones. Perhaps you prefer to kneel. And I'm going to leave you here to breathe for a few more minutes. And I'm going to just remind you that, a lot of times when we're teaching our body to do something differently than it's been used to doing, it's going to feel wrong and awkward. I will tell you that sometimes finding effective, safe alignment in yoga poses does feel awkward because it's counter to what we're used to. But in the long run, it's helping us to leverage this amazing gift of yoga, the technology that yoga is, for really, really positive transformation. So if you like this video, I encourage you, please, to do all the things. You know what they are. You like it, you can comment on it, you can share it, you can subscribe to my channel, and guess what? You can go to the info and you can check out my website and see about joining in a class or getting some private yoga instruction. Thank you so much. Namaste.